thank you so much for joining. My name is Whitney. I'm here with Blick Art Materials, and we'll be doing a reverse tie-dye project tonight using Rit Liquid Dye. I have some Jacquard decolorants here, and we're using the Bella Canvas t-shirts. It's gonna be really fun. I have a few different projects up here and a few different methods that I'll be showing you tonight. But before I get into all of that, I want to ask you a question to get the chat started. And as you know, my favorite part of doing this is looking back through the chat and seeing what all of the responses are. So tonight, I would like to know, did you go to camp as a kid? And what was your favorite camp project, if you did? Or if you were a kid that didn't go to camp and you wanted to do a project, what was that? So that will enter you to win a $100 Blick gift card. And don't forget to like this post, like our page, and please follow us on Facebook. So I've mentioned it a few times, I think, in some of our demos that I actually have a background in camp education, not sleepaway camp. As a kid, I went to sleepaway camp and it terrified me. Not in like a homesickness way, but I was so terribly shy and I thought all the kids there were already friends, and so I talked to no one. And then grew up to be a camp counselor and do these lovely demos for you all on Facebook Live. So the world's a wacky place. But tonight we are doing tie-dye. And for me, tie-dye, of course, makes me think back to being at camp. Hence my question to you tonight. And a few different processes going on. So let me focus myself here. First of all, and the first thing I'll demo for you is going to be the Jacquard decolorant. And that is what I used on this sweatshirt. It's what I used on my shirt here. And you can see it gives you this really stark line, and you can actually paint this on. And of course, I did already get a bit ahead of myself. I wanted to let you all know, for those of you who have been joining week after week, this is going to be a little bit different from the normal demos that you've become accustomed to seeing from Blick, because a lot of these processes, they involve boiling water and rinsing things under a sink of flowing water for lengths of time, or microwave heat setting, and some of them have an odor to them. And it's not so bad that you wouldn't be able to do it at home safely with a window open, a fan, even better, go outside. But unfortunately, we don't have all of those options available to us up here at this table. I have no washing machine under my table, unfortunately. And you all don't want to sit around and like wait for a wash cycle, right? That's really boring. So some of these I'll show you part of a process, and I'm gonna talk through what I can't show you, okay? So hopefully there won't be too many questions or too much confusion about it, but if there is, we'll be in the chat to answer all of those for you. First of all, I'm gonna put on my gloves. Gloves are very important with tie-dye for a number of reasons. One, I don't want to stain my hands. It's a hassle to get off. And also, this decolorant is not something I want on my skin. Of course, if you do get it on your skin, just wash it off. But I just want to avoid that situation entirely. So, like I said, this is decolorant from Jacquard. It's for removing areas of color on natural fabrics. So the shirt I have here is 100% cotton. That is where it works its best. Bella Canvas is actually a blend. It does have some other fibers in it, the percentage is low enough, clearly I still got results there as well. All right, so hopefully you can see this. It's very milky, and it's thick, but it's not a gel. It's almost the consistency of a pouring medium, but it won't spread. And I have my very sort of cheap and efficient chip brush here. I want to show you something fun. I forgot about this. So for this shirt, to get my really brushy brush strokes here, I fringed my brush. If you've ever cut your own bangs or, you know, French haircut, where shall I need a collecting. Here we go. I'm just going to cut into my brush a bit. Basically, I want to mess it up just a little bit. Sorry, Tessa, I completely forgot to warn you about this part.
No worries.
All right. I have my friend Tessa here, making sure I stay under the camera and you all can see what I'm doing. I've now made a mess, so I'm just gonna lift this up, shake it out. Okay, and I do have a little piece of cardboard in here. Maybe you can see the outline of it. Now, the Bella canvas is actually thick enough, their sweatshirts are thick enough that when I made that one, I didn't need to put anything in between. But with the t-shirts, they're a much thinner material. I actually, when I made this one, I wasn't thinking about it, and so I have extra dye on the back there that doesn't really make sense, but I'm okay with it, and it gives it character. So hopefully you can see this go on. It is clear, but it has a milky aspect to it. And something that I really like about this is that it needs to be heat activated. So this isn't going to become permanent or show up or really do anything until I add heat. And I do have my iron up here. We will get to that later. I'm starting out with this because it will need to dry first. And I didn't really center that very well. If this wasn't a demo, I probably would wash it out and move it over like 1.5 inches because I'm that controlling, right? But it is a demo, so ahead we forge. And you do want to make sure you're really saturating your fabric. Or I should say, you should make sure you're saturating it where you want. I did want this to look brushy, right? So it's okay to leave a few areas, but if you want solid coverage, you might need to go over it just a couple times. Okay. Actually, that works out quite well. I'm now happy with my placement. So something I have to remind myself with tie-dye is that, like, the whole point of it is that it's kind of random and uncontrollable, right? And you gotta let go a little. Okay, beautiful, done. I'll just wipe off my brush here. And I'm gonna throw it right there. Okay, close that up because it is a little bit stinky. And yeah, so that also comes in a spray, the decolorant mist. So I could also have placed a stencil down and sprayed this mist over it. And I have an example here. Let me just take off my gloves. I wouldn't want to get any stray decolorant on it. Ooh. Gloves are hard to take off. Bear with me here. Okay, gloves are off. All right, this one here. So this has, I'm gonna set this aside. Now this is a piece where I used the decolorant mist, and perhaps you can see here the butterfly. Am I in the right spot? Did I get the right spot there? Cool.
Just down a little bit.
Okay. I'll open it up, bring it down. So I have this lovely butterfly here, and I just used a simple stencil. Any stencil will do, whatever image you want to transfer. And sprayed my mist, heat set it, and realized I had this really big like white box line around it and thought, oh no, I've ruined it. I will just reverse tie-dye it, and then the butterfly will disappear and no one will see my mistakes and it will be great, right? And it is great, but it did something I didn't expect at all, in that the butterfly remained. And even where I used, for this, getting a bit ahead of myself, for the reverse tie-dye, I used Rit Color Remover. So first decolorant butterfly, then Rit Color Remover, and this stayed lighter still. So you can see that sort of double image, which is really fun. I highly encourage you to just play with some of these processes. 'Cause sometimes something really unexpected happens and it's really exciting. You end up with a butterfly on your shirt. Okay, so I started to talk about the Rit Color Remover with that. And this is unfortunately one of those things that I cannot do in this room. So we do have an exhaust fan. I would do it if I could turn the exhaust fan on, but then you wouldn't be able to hear me and it would sound like there was a train in the room and it would be awful and no more helpful than just telling you and sort of pretending to walk through this process. So in using Rit Color Remover, let me move this, I don't need this right now. I have a blank shirt here, and I'm going to do a swirl tie. So I'm just grabbing it in the middle, I'm twisting, being pretty loose with my twisting, and you know, there are tons of methods for tying your tie-dye, right? There are all kinds of patterns, all kinds of techniques that you can employ. If you're really interested in just the art of tying fabric, I would check out Japanese shibori work, and I think, am I right in thinking that we did that as a demo at one point, Tessa? No, Ashley didn't do that as a demo, did she? Time flies. Sometimes we forget. There may be a shibori demo out there, but possibly not with a video. It's definitely on our project page and with all the steps and all the materials. It's basically fancy Japanese tie-dye with indigo. But there are all of these methods of how you would, how you can roll and tie fabric to get these beautiful patterns like nothing else. So I'm just wrapping my rubber bands around, and notice I am making this quite tight. I want this to be very firm. And if I would tuck this under maybe, and I will show you why that is. I have two examples here. This one was not wrapped tightly. So this lovely shirt here has almost no black has remained. I basically made myself a white shirt with a little swirl in the front. And that's because I just didn't tie my rubber bands tightly enough. But this is what we are aiming for. We want something more like this. I want to see some of the black in there so that when I add color, you get this really great contrast, right? With the stark black and then the bright colors, and that's the whole point of reverse tie-dye, right? Otherwise, it's just tie-dye. And I did want to show you very quickly also, why would I be using Rit color remover, right? There's so many videos out there that tell you to just use bleach, chlorine bleach, it's totally fine. One, I don't get the same results with it, and believe me, I tried and I tried and I tried. And it doesn't soak into the fabric the same way. So this one sort of has the reverse problem of the one where I didn't tie it tightly enough, right? This one, I have a whole lot of black space and very, very little space left for color. And even though these are the same shirt, the difference between this orange and this yellow, clearly the Rit color remover removed more color than the bleach, and it's not actually harmful to the fibers of your fabric. So that's why, I mean, it's a really great product. I really recommend you check it out. Maybe even check out Rit's website. I was recently, of course, in preparation for this, checking out some stuff there, and they have a whole lot of information for you. So, okay, this is where we play pretend. We are going to pretend that I am going to fill this nearly to the top with a gallon of water, and I am going to use half of my packet of color remover. Really, I believe Rit's recommendation is 1 packet per 3 gallons of water, and that will dye, does it say it in pounds? I don't see it, and I don't want to make it up and lie to you, but I believe it's a few pounds of shirts. I've done this with 4 shirts in a bowl before, and half the packet and a gallon of water. So I would first pour my water into my bowl, and I've found to get the right temperature, you want very, very hot water. And I've found using an electric kettle works great. You want it at the point where it is near boiling, but not yet boiling, right? Somewhere in that close to boiling range. And an electric kettle works great for that. And then I don't want to mess with, you know, taking the temperature of my water and making sure it's somewhere between 140 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I just used my kettle and it worked great. So I would cut this with scissors. Don't rip it. You don't want to breathe this. And when you pour it pour it very slowly and gently and as close to the surface of the water as possible. So if my water's here, I'm pouring here, right? You don't want to make a big dust cloud plume and breathe this in. And you actually don't want to do this part with, if you're doing this with kiddos, it's perfectly fine project to do with kids, but you don't want them with you while you're pouring it and doing this particular part of the project. So after that, I would throw in my wrapped black shirt here and make sure to stir it. You do want to stay with your piece. Your color is going to change very rapidly. And you need to watch, make sure it's absorbing evenly in the fabric. You'll need to stir it, maybe flip it over with some tongs, keep checking on it. The max time you would leave this in here would be 20 minutes, maybe push it to 30. I got results like this after 10 minutes, I want to say. It was under 15. We'll go with 12 minutes. And yeah, so you want to watch it. You want to make sure you don't over remove color. I'm going to put that away. Next up, I would then wash that in a washing machine. I'd rinse it out in the sink first, then wash it in a washing machine, and of course unband it. And then I would have this lovely product. Now, I do have some dye with me here, and I've got some colors pre-made. We are going to color this. I do want you all to see some stuff, right? This is a really fun project with a lot of color and a lot of sort of moving parts to it. Now this one, it looks like I did not do a swirl pattern, but this time I am, and that's okay. You don't necessarily have to follow the same pattern or the same fold from decoloring to tie-dyeing. And something else I learned in making our examples here is that I prefer the results that I get when the second time around, you know, the first time I told you to wrap it very, very tightly. In fact, I will grab that so we have reference. This time I'm going to wrap it very loosely. And the reason for that is I want the color to be able to flow in here. And it's not going to dye where it's black, right? It's not like tie-dye where, like straight tie-dye, like this piece up here, where if you don't wrap it tightly enough, you get color bleeding. You don't get that stark white to color contrast. In this, we're working with a color that's too dark for that to happen with, right? There's no risk of me accidentally dyeing the black parts of this shirt pink. It's just not gonna happen. It's not in the cards for this shirt. So I've left this very, very loose by comparison. They may be slightly different sizes also, but they're clearly a different wrap. So let me put that away. I'm gonna get out a little bucket here and put my gloves back on. And I'm going to mix a color for you. I have already mixed red, orange, and this is cherry red and sunshine, sunset orange, sunrise orange. I have yellow and eggplant. This is my favorite Rit color so far, actually, is the eggplant. It's a really dark, sort of wine-colored purple. I'm going to put my gloves on again. Hopefully Tessa's not gonna have to come over here and help me pull them off after. All right, so Tessa, do you have a color preference? Pick a color, any color.
The aqua blue that you got there.
Yeah, the aquamarine, yes. This is another good color. All right, I'm giving it a good shake, as you can hear. And that is very important. The pigment is going to settle in the bottom of this bottle. And I'm probably towards the end of this bottle. I've used a lot of this. But you want to make sure your mixture is mixed. Here I have a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to add that into my Yorker bottle. And all of these things that I'm using tonight, all of the things that I'm using here tonight, you can find on our bundle page for this project. And you can just follow the link in the description. And I've got a whole list of materials for you, along with some written out step-by-step instructions. And I think that's actually really important for this particular project, just because I really am meandering around here, right? We're using a few different products, showing you at least 2 different processes and with very different results. So I want to make sure you have, you know about those written instructions. I'll put this back up here, but it's empty, folks. I used all of that aquamarine, Tessa. Not in this bottle, of course, in other projects. All right, so I'm just gonna give it a little stir here. And I have used, 2 tablespoons of dye, at least. I didn't measure it, obviously. You saw me pouring it there, but I've been filling these Yorker bottles for a little while now, and I trust my ability to eyeball it. And then I'm going to carefully, because this is water that is hot, I let it come to a near boil in the kettle, and then it's been sitting down there for a little while now while I've been talking to you all, and it's cooled off a bit. These do come with caps. You may also notice I used tape to show what color is in my bottle. And this is something I would really encourage you all to do as well. Or sometimes if it's just me and I'm at home doing a project like this, I'll leave the product bottle behind the mixture. And that's just because you know, the colors I picked to show you, they do all look like the color that they are, right? This orange is looking pretty orangey in its bottle. But some of the colors, they don't quite, before they activate on the fabric, they don't quite look like what they say they are. And it's also incredibly easy to mix up your pink with your coral, or you know, purple and eggplant are very close together. So you just want to know what you're working with, right? That's also the teacher in me. If you're doing this with kids, definitely label your bottles, because you will never know what color was in there to begin with. And just cleaning up with my, so tie-dye's a little messy, right? And I actually discovered Blick sells these lovely flour sack towels, like tea towels. They're blank, right? And I love getting everything I can out of a project and its entire process. So I decided I would make a tie-dyed tea towel just as a remnant from my cleaning up as I go along tie-dyeing. It might not turn out that great in the end. I'll let y'all know in the chat how it works out, but I'm I'm excited to see what happens there. I might end up with a really cool tea towel. Okay, so I'm using a little bowl here, and I'm just going to do this in hand, but you can also use a drying rack for baking and just set that on there. And that way, all of your dye won't pool into the fabric below. You know, if I set this here, eventually I'm going to end up with a muddy color on the bottom of all that excess dye. And I don't want that. So either hold it or use something like a drying rack. And definitely have something under that to catch all of your dye. Don't just put a drying rack on top of your counter and hope it'll work out. You're gonna tie-dye your counter that way. And I'm just adding color going around.
For everyone that's recently joined, do you want to tell them about our giveaway?
I do. Thank you, Tessa. Tessa's here to remind me that of all the things I sometimes forget about, right? We have a $100 e-gift card giveaway. And to be eligible for that, all you have to do, and of course it's a Blick e-gift card giveaway, all you have to do to be eligible for that is answer the prompt, my question for the night. And that question is, did you go to camp as a kid? And if so, what is your favorite camp project? And also be sure to like this video, follow us on Facebook, like the page, and we will be drawing a name at the end of the night for a $100 e-gift card. You can get a lot of tie-dye materials with $100. Or whatever you fancy. So that is a good deal there. And this is taking just a bit longer than I thought it would, but you can imagine how I would go around with each color, adding my color. This eggplant really disappears into the black, but it shows up later. It's actually what I used for this lovely purple sleeve here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna actually go ahead and wrap this as is. Really, I would go around and fill all this in. You can see I've left a lot of blank spots, but I wanna get back to this other one where I used the decolorant. I want you to see what we can do there. Just dry off. I've lost a supply. No, I haven't. Okay, so this is where you might think I've lost it, but Rit, their liquid dye, they actually recommend for tie-dyeing that you follow the process we have so far, but follow through, finish it up, make sure you cover all your white spaces on your shirt. And then use clear plastic wrap, wrap your piece up tightly. Tightly, tightly, tightly. Make sure you get both ends. And, oh, that's a messy rip. There we go. All right, and then what I would do is rinse out my bowl here. I would plop this in my bowl, and that goes right in this microwave here. I'm sure you've been wondering, why do I have a microwave up here on my table? And that is why. These need to be, or these can be, heat set in a microwave 2 minutes. And then once it's cooled, you don't want to burn yourself. They do get quite hot. You would take off that plastic wrap. You would rinse it out under the sink in cold water and then wash it in cold water. And Rit does also have a Color Stay dye fixative that you could apply after that. And there are directions on the back. There are a few different methods. You can let your t-shirt soak in a bucket, just like with the decolorant, but now you're using dye fixative. You can also do it straight in the washing machine, which is pretty fun. All right, I'm gonna take my gloves off again. There we go. Okay. So my gloves are off. I am going to bring this back into the mix. And the reason I had, again, using that lovely flour sack towel, I actually read a great article recently about flour sack towels and the term sack dress, right? And in World War II, and then, well, before then, sorry, in the Great Depression until World War II, flour came in actual cloth bags, and that fabric would then be used to make garments in the Depression, because you're using everything you can use, right? No one had money, everyone was very desperate. You're gonna use any resource you have at your fingertips, and you're buying flour to feed your family and then making dresses. But this was well known by flour companies, and so they actually started making prints that were made for garments. This is super random, has nothing to do with my project, but I thought it was really cool. And they even used dyes to print dress patterns on flour bags that would disappear when they were washed. That went away with rations later. But this is dry now, and I know because I can't really see where I wrote Blick. I mean, I can. I have to angle myself a bit. You can catch it in the light. But I have my iron here. Remember I said it has to be heat set to activate. And this, I really wanted to make sure I was showing you. Tessa, am I in the right spot for showing? Cool. Because it's super fun. I'm gonna test the heat of my iron here. Oh, that's a cold iron. Oh no. I will return. It is on. Maybe I just need to give it a minute to get a little hotter. Don't do this at home. Don't touch the bottom of your iron. Okay, it's getting there. It's just taking its time. It had to wake up again. It thought it was done for the day, but. Okay, so while I wait for that, I'm just gonna jump ahead to a piece. I'll still do it. It's really fun to see. But this is what we're gonna add some color to, and this was the same process. So after I heat set this, I would then need to, again, rinse it out in cold water and then wash it, and that gets you to this stage. There we go. Okay, so that's what we're aiming for, and let's see. I know we all want to move an iron back and forth. You can see all this steam. I have my steam on its highest setting, and it is on the highest heat possible for this fabric. I actually have this pushed all the way up to linen, even though I'm using cotton. And you can start to see the transfer. I actually really love that the steam, the holes where steam comes out in the iron, that will actually transfer over. So you do need to move the positioning of your iron around, but what you will not do, please don't, I learned the hard way, don't move this around like you're ironing a blouse or your pants, right? The way you would normally iron. What will happen is you will smear it and you'll end up, I have a few smears on my shirt, right? And I think I can go back in with black dye and actually fix that. But once its heat set, it's set, right? And I could imagine just moving the iron around and then you end up with what basically looks like a deodorant stain. I know that always happens to me when I'm wearing a black shirt, is that I always get deodorant on my shirt and it looks terrible. But this would be that, but permanent. You don't want that. So don't move your iron around. Well, move it around the piece, but don't press and move back and forth. I think you all know what I mean. So, just gonna do a little bit more here. And this really is, I mean, it's so fun to see this happen. It's like magic. And so much of that dye is removed and you're left with what I would think looks like a crazy bleach stain, although we've already talked about how this was my result with bleach. So this is really strong stuff and it's safer for your fabric here. And that's with both the decolorant and the Rit color remover. Just a few more. I'm not going to be able to dye this one while we're up here because it needs to be washed first. So I will call that one done, but I think there are a few parts I could go over a little bit more. And if you do end up with, you know, if this turns out to be just a spot where I didn't get enough decolorant in, you can go over it again, let it dry, and then just iron it, and then wash the whole thing later. All right, so I'm gonna move this down here out of my way. I'm not going to be ironing anymore, so I'm gonna get rid of that towel, which hopefully kept our table safe. Looks like it worked. And I'm gonna break out this shirt here. And this was done using the decolorant, right? This is the process that we just did. And I'm gonna show you how there are a few different ways you can add color back into something like this. We already looked at the tie-dye, right? The reverse tie-dye, where you take away color and then retie and add your dye colors. Now this one though, because I've actually made a pattern, I want to do something different with it. I want to make this look like these are all their own little brush strokes, right? So basically this is the kiddo version of the sweatshirt I have up here. And to add color, and notice you saw me put that bag in there, right? So that is to keep the colors from bleeding through. You can see this is much thinner than that sweatshirt material. So for this one, I definitely want a barrier of some kind. I don't want my color to leak all the way through. And I'm going to apply it with a brush. I have some foam brushes here, and because I'm lazy, I have one for each color. But that might not be the case for you. Just make sure you're rinsing them out in between colors. There's an easier way to pour this. Okay. Now you could also apply straight from the bottle. This was actually colored straight from the bottle. I put it on a drying rack, the shirt on a drying rack, and just kind of straight from the bottle, did a little rainbow kind of across, and wasn't really thinking about it much in my color shifts. I wanted it to look a bit random and tie-dye like, right? So you can do that straight from the bottle. It's a little bit messy to do up here with the table. I'm already seeing where I'm making new stains in our lovely wooden table. So I'm not gonna just squeeze bottles all over the place. With my luck, it'll go right into the camera. But I want to show you another method you can use that maybe you wouldn't have thought of at home. So I have my foam brush, and I am just going to boop, add some color. Now I will warn you, the colors, again, sometimes they look very similar. And you saw when I put that eggplant on, it almost looked black. It was really hard to see what color it was. So there are a few methods to dealing with that if you don't want the same colors next to each other, or if you want a little bit more control. Although this is turning out so bright, I would have no need to. With the sweatshirt, I was having a problem differentiating the colors because it was the thicker fabric, I think. And for that, I picked one color and went across the whole shirt on one side where I wanted it. And then I picked another color, went across the whole shirt, putting it where I wanted it. And I sort of went color by color, just so it wouldn't get mixed up. But with this, I think I can see it just fine. But since that did happen, I wanted to share it with you in case you experience that. And now is a good time to remind everyone, if you haven't already answered our question, please do so. Don't miss out on that $100 e-gift card for Blick. You can get a lot of fun supplies with that. And all you need to do to be eligible is answer our question of the night in the Facebook Live chat. And my question tonight is, did you go to camp as a kid? And if so, what was your favorite camp project? I know I already shared that, oh, you can't see when I work up there, can you? That I went to sleepaway camp and was just far too shy to have a good time. But I've had some really great day camp experiences as a counselor, and it's fun seeing something from both sides like that too. Tessa, did you go to camp as a kid?
I did go to camp as a kid. It was really fun. We did a lot of really cool projects. I can't remember any on the top of my head, but anything with pottery, I feel like that was a big
yes. Tessa said that she can't quite remember a specific project, but pottery, anything with pottery was always fun at camp. Just gonna wipe this off on my special tie-dye towel, my flour sack towel. It's probably a good idea to put your gloves back on for this, but I thought I would be tidy enough that I wouldn't need it. But that's gonna be your whole process. And then you go through. I'm not gonna color all of these in because I made a lot of little cute paintbrush splotches. But I think you've got the idea there. So again, we're gonna finish up here very soon. So be sure to answer that question and we'll announce the winner shortly. I just wanna make sure I've covered all my bases here because we did a lot of stuff tonight, right? I have some regular tie-dye up here that I didn't even show you regular tie-dye process. Although I do wanna say for this shirt, this was not one that bled through. This was actually the Bella canvas. They have it's probably not called just pink, but it's like a corally pink color. It's this color. And I added a couple of darker pinks or a darker pink and a darker red on top of it, and did that in a tie-dye. So that was really fun to do, I thought. I'm not always a big fan of the stark white then color kind of traditional tie-dye. So this one here is a bit more my jam. We also used, what did we use? We used the deColorant mist with a stencil to make a lighter colored stencil, to make a image on fabric. And then this one was also reverse tie-dyed using Rit color remover. And that was pretty much the same process of tying and rolling your fabric, right? But instead of using color, you put it in a solution with this and you're removing the color. So then you can add fun, bright colors back in the tie-dye. And the last thing we used was the deColorant, and we brushed it on in this form. And that is what made this lovely sweatshirt, my t-shirt, this one here that we were just working on. It gives you a little bit more control, right? Because it's only going on where you put it. And you can write anything you want, make all these fun designs. It's really a process where you're gonna end up with something great, right? And it's really fun. For me, tie-dye is all about the process of doing it and not always the result, but thinking back to those days at camp and just having fun and making the thing, right? Is really the experience. Okay, so I hope you guys try this out. I hope that you check out our bundle page, follow that link in our description, and I have all the materials I used here tonight listed, as well as a breakdown of the different processes that I did. And I hope you have fun with it. Be sure to join in on Thursday. We will have a guest artist presenter, so it will be a lot of fun as well. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.